the applications at the end of class on positive externalities and public goods are not particularly hard, but they're really important, so I thought I'd give them a run through here in this screencast. So first off, this application 5.8 public good. We've got 5 neighbors living along the shore of a small lake. They have this potential to watch this synchronized swimming show, and it's a public good because if the show's going on in the lake, they each have their own dock. Their ability to enjoy the show doesn't in any way compromise everybody else's ability, so it's non-rivalrous. The show is, and then of course you can't keep somebody from going down on their dock and watching the show, so it's non-excludable too. So it's a public good. The key to the public good issue is that the value, the social value of the good is the sum of everybody's value, because if the good is offered, everybody can enjoy it. That's different than the private goods we've mostly been concerned with, where the value of the good is restricted to the value of whoever consumed it, because if I ate the loaf of bread, it wasn't available for anybody else. All right, so as far as how much of the good should we offer, well, every unit of the good that is valued more than the cost of providing it should be offered, and no good that was valued less than the cost of providing it should be offered. So again, we're looking at marginal costs and marginal benefits, only the difference is that we're looking at the sum across everybody's value for the marginal social value. So for that first one, 60 plus 50, 110, plus 30, 140, 170, 190. Well, 190 is sure a lot higher than the costs of 100, so yep, we should supply that first hour, or that the group should get together and contract that first hour. The second one is a little closer, but 50 plus 40 is 90, plus 5 is 95, plus 10 is 105. That is higher than the cost, so we should get that, the neighbors should get that second hour too. But this third hour, even though Smith and Ricardo really enjoy it, nobody else does, and the total value of that third hour is just 75, and so we shouldn't get that one. All right, so we're left with the answer that 2 hours of the performance is the social optimal. Now, in real life, this is much harder than it looks, because we don't have a market to tell us what people's valuations are and are not. If there's a box of Pop-Tarts on the shelf in the supermarket for $3, if I buy it, I have revealed that my valuation of that box is more than $3, or maybe it's exactly $3, but it's not less than $3. If I don't buy it, I've revealed that my valuation of that good is less than $3. With public goods, we don't have that revelation about people's valuations, and so we have to estimate, often with cost-benefit studies, survey techniques. We have to be skeptical of surveys, though. A later application gets at that point a little bit more carefully. In the real world, we have to do our best. How many missiles are optimal socially to defend ourselves against whatever? You know, these are, we don't have people revealing their valuations in markets. Governments often are motivated by the social good, but often governments are motivated, any congressperson is motivated on to bring as many benefits to her district as possible, paid for by people out of district, and there's some bad incentives there. Even if the value to my members of my district is less than the cost to people outside my district, all I care about is the value to people in my district. So, there's an inefficient race to spend public resources. Also, of course, bureaucrats can be much more narrowly self-interested than that. We don't have a market to discipline. Nevertheless, we know from our study in Module 5 that markets simply cannot, or can only rarely achieve the optimal level of goods produced and consumed when there are big externalities, and of course in the extreme case when it's a public good. So we need government to step in and do it, but government's very imperfect, and so presents quite a big problem. Actually, that's the big problem that the majority of economists and political scientists and many other branches of learning are primarily concerned with. All right, so I have another question related to the same the same problem. So here we've got this problem where we know 2 hours are the best that this group can do. Can this group get there by voting on it? Just a straight line vote. And we're going to assume that they've got to share the cost equally. But what's going to happen is that 2 hours is the right number of hours, but if they split the money equally, each person's going to have to pay $40. And we see that Smith, who values the 2 hours at 110, and Ricardo, that value the good at the 2 hour show at 90, they are all for it, right? But Mark's 35 valuation, he's not interested in paying $40 for something he values at 35. Keynes, neither. 30 is less than the 40 he'd have to pay. And Friedman. So if we took a vote and shares and costs were split evenly, the vote would fail. So what do we do? And this is a central problem, right? People in the economy, some people value police protection really highly. Some people value police protection at a really low value, and it's not always the case that in a democratic society we'll get to the right solution, because if people vote their self-interests and benefits are not equally distributed, we'll get votes against things that would actually improve social well-being. So how do you pay for a public good? How do you allocate the payment shares across individuals in your economy? It gets to be a big problem. In a lot of taxing districts in the United States and elsewhere, the approximation of people's willingness to pay is made by people's income. People with higher income are taxed at a higher rate, and rich people are typically willing to pay for more than poor people are. They're able to pay for more things than poor people are. And with police services, the rich have millions of dollars of assets to protect, and the poor have no assets to protect. So there's some fairness there. But this gets to be a big problem when we think about how do we pay for things, how do we get desirable things passed through an electorate when maybe the majority doesn't value them, but the values of the minority are so high that it's something that should be offered. The other way we get around this is, maybe I don't like the money spent on the Iraq military adventure. I'd just soon see that ended. But I have to pay for that anyway. But the government spends a lot of money on national parks that I strongly support, and trails through the national forests. And maybe I have to live with some military spending that I would not personally endorse. But on the other hand, there's other people that are all for the military adventure, but think money on environmental amenities are wasted, and they have to live with it. So in some sense, we compensate each other if I'll kick in for the military expenditures that I don't like, but you do, and you kick in for the environmental spending that I like and you don't, and hopefully it balances out. And whether it does or doesn't, the government has the authority to send you to jail if you don't pay your taxes, if you don't buy that package of services. So that we can see that, on the one hand, the government is an agency that can get things done that wouldn't otherwise be done necessarily by markets, but there's a tremendous potential for abuse of power too, and so we're right to be skeptical of bureaucrats telling us that this money needs to be spent. Anyways, I don't pretend to have the answer for you, but it's a real good question. It's a fun question to argue about. As far as the mechanics of the problem, either C or B would be an acceptable answer. That if there's no side payments, we'd get a 3-2 vote. If people are voting their narrow self-interest, we'd get a 3-2 vote against. The There might be some side payments by Smith and Ricardo, say, hey, we'll pick up a little bit bigger share of the tab, and because they really value that second hour, and they might be willing to do that. And we see neighbors do this kind of thing all the time. In fact, we see neighbors just suck it up and pay for things they don't necessarily endorse just for the purpose of contributing to neighborhood harmony, which itself has many, many benefits. And then finally, this is the one we didn't quite even get to in class. This last one. Yeah, well, let's pretend we were trying to figure out payment shares, and we'll just go ask people. And so, what is the problem with asking each neighbor about their valuation of the performance and assigning payment shares accordingly? Well, here, when we take this survey and people know that their answers are going to determine their payment shares, everybody's going to have an incentive to lowball, right? I'd rather enjoy the show and have you pay for it than enjoying the show and pay for it myself. So it's what we're going to do is this tendency to lowball. This answer C would be the one for this one. Now, on the other hand, if we were asking people, how much do you value the show, and somebody else is going to pay for it, then we have a tendency to exaggerate valuation, right? If my answer is only contributing to the question of whether or not we get the good, and my payment share is independent of my answer, well then, and people that are, love the environment, whatever, when asked about how much do you value the viability of the spotted owl species, oh, well, $1 billion, it's whatever, you can say anything, and you're not required to pay anything out. Can we really believe the survey results that come from such methodology? No, of course we can't. There's everybody in that kind of survey has every incentive to exaggerate. So we have to be real careful when we go to survey methods to assess people's benefits and costs. We have to be real careful to try to get true valuations and true opportunity costs. And it's very difficult to do when we're not asking people to actually spend the money or incur any sort of opportunity costs. There are methodologies to do that, but as you might imagine, they're less than perfect.